Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the 200th episode of the Social Housing Roundtable. I'm a little bit stunned we got this far. I recall very much the early days when there'd be about 3 or 4 of us in the room, and sometimes there'd just be me and the guest speaker. So to be here and all this time, 4 or 5 years later at episode 200 is incredible. And thank you, everybody, for your support. Thank you to Alert Call and CMSG who are sponsoring this year. Thank you to everyone who sponsored us and helped us get this far. It's genuinely been a privilege. And Elaine Middleton, who's with us today as our head of partnerships, this definitely is nowhere near the end of the roundtable. If anything, we're just getting going. So yeah, thank you to everyone who's with us and who's joined us and who's supported us. It really means the world. To those who are new, because actually there are people here who haven't joined us before, which is still amazing to see every week. My name is Matt Baird. I've been the founder and chair of this incredible community for the last 4 or 5 years. We have now got over kind of 4,500 members, which is just wild across various formats and things along those lines. Day-to-day I work in recruitment. That's what I've done for the last 14, 15 years. I'm self-employed. That money kind of keeps this running for free. So if you are looking for recruitment support, please do reach out. But I'm also chair of the board for Spring Housing in Birmingham. I'm on the St Anne's side of our board, and I'm one of the founding members of both the Supported Housing Network and the Supported Exempt Accommodation Forum. So kind of get involved in lots of different networking groups. But we wanted to do something a bit special if we could. But that's the first time I've ever been muted by a co-host, so I somehow got muted. I think basically that's a new one. So we wanted to do something special for the 200th episode. We've been trying to put something together for a while and trying to find out what might work and what might not work. And delighted that it took a little bit of filling in and waiting for the campaign to be announced and everything else. We had to get the timings right and everything that went with it. But Julie Haydon was able to come on. So those who don't know Julie, I'm going to pass over to her to introduce herself properly in terms of all her other hats in just a moment. But for the context of today, she is the new president of the Chartered Institute of Housing. She has got a brand new campaign which which has now launched, and we're up and running. So we're going to investigate a little bit of that today, explore where those ideas came from, and then hopefully invite you all to have a more open discussion in terms of your thoughts on the topic, on what you'd like to see from the presidency over the next 12 months and how you can get involved. I'm just going to mute Henrik there. But Julie, I'm going to pass over to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you.
Welcome today for episode 200 and for talk a bit about your campaign. I'll pass over to you.
Thank you so much, Matt. Good morning to everyone, and congratulations to the team on reaching the 200th episode of the Social Housing Roundtable. No small achievement, I would say, but there is an ongoing commitment and a testament, I guess, to consistency, commitment to honest conversation, shared learning and amplifying voices from across the sector. And I think that kind of fits with some of what I'll talk around today. So I am Julie Haydon. I am the Director for Corporate Services for Wolverhampton Homes. We manage around about 19,000 properties on behalf of the City of Wolverhampton Council, and we're one of 4 managing agents in the city. But I'm absolutely delighted. I love my job. I do absolutely love my job, and so many opportunities to make such a difference is amazing. But I am delighted to be here to introduce the presidential campaign Rooted in Resilience. I guess it's very much about kind of helping housing professionals move from simply getting through to feeling energised and supported and connected in the work that we do. And I'm hoping it will also provide practical tools and real life inspiration to think about how we embed a growth mindset into personal development, team culture and leadership, so we can better serve our communities whilst looking after one another along the way. And I think that fits really well, I guess, with my background as well. So I started many, many years ago in human resources, learning and development. I operated as a consultant for a while. I've worked across public services, both in local councils, the NHS. I've also worked for private sector, and the kind of challenges between the two very different. But I think ultimately, for us in housing at the moment, there's a real complexity, and I guess a bit of trauma and kind of in the constant change that's coming through, and it is emotionally demanding, I would say. So thinking about where resilience comes from, it's a little bit from growth. And if there's something that can help us stay kind of curious rather than overwhelmed and give us a space to ask, I guess, what can I learn from this rather than, why is this happening to me? So I think that kind of concept about growth mindset, it's a way of looking at ourselves, I guess, with some kindness and possibility. And interestingly, I was talking to I'm across in Ireland at the beginning of November, and we were talking about resilience and kind of what it meant, and the word kindness comes up an awful lot, and I think it's really important just in terms of our customers and also ourselves. So instead of seeing, I guess, obstacles that block us in the road, it's about viewing them as chances to learn, adapt, and improve. And I think it also shows that for any of us, however long in the tooth we are, and I am fairly, it's more about what can we change if we embraced a mindset more intentionally. So not just about training sessions or workshops, but really how we respond to mistakes, how we support each other, and kind of how we grow together. So I think over the past year, while I've been serving as vice president, and I was just saying to Matt actually, the year as VP tends to be fairly quiet for a period in time, and then suddenly, probably since about April, May, it's really ramped up in a brilliant way, in an absolutely brilliant way. And I've been working closely with CIH to shape the campaign that I launched at the AGM earlier in October. I think when I kind of looked at resilience and how I could translate that to a campaign and to customers that we work with and support and staff and partners, it's just about, I guess, kind of, we all know the environment we're operating in isn't easy, and that's ours for our customers, our partners, our stakeholders. And when you think about the pressures that are mounting, resources are tight, expectations have changed. We were talking yesterday about low-level ASB and the fact that the police have moved away from that. So, who picks that up? The bar for social services is higher than it ever was. So again, who supports in that kind of interim? And I think the expectations probably on housing professionals are probably higher than they've ever been. And I guess what carried me through some of those moments is just kind of very simple touchstones, I guess, and thinking about resilience, the willingness to adapt, support of colleagues who believed in me. And I say this very often, I've got a busy role, which we all have, and I couldn't do that without the support of the team around me, and that's allowed me to kind of move forward with this campaign as well. So I want to use the campaign a little bit to make sure that those touch points are not left to chance almost, but are actively kind of nurtured across the sector. So there's some of the elements of the principles that a previous president, Eileen Evans, did Shine a Light campaign. So I want to focus on some of that mental resilience and wellbeing in housing. And I think it's okay not to pretend that everything is fine, but it is about creating a culture that allows us to cope with challenge, because the one thing we do know is that the challenge will continue for customers and communities. And I think that's important as well. It's not only as us as housing professionals, it is something we see day in and day out from our customers and communities. And the resilience, I think I've been continually inspired by people who, even in the face of real hardship, find the strength to adapt, to persevere, and to look after people around them as well. And I think if people can show such resilience in such difficult spaces, then surely we as housing professionals should do everything we can to match that, and kind of deliver with the leadership that customers deserve. So campaign will spotlight on how we build that culture. We're looking at some practical tools around professional development, also the networks that give us a sense of belonging, I guess, and leadership that kind of promotes and prioritises well-being. I think there's always been, for me, and certainly for Wolverhampton Homes, our investment in our people is key. And I think also, honouring the resilience of our communities, and with all of that, the sector, I believe, will continue to deliver some absolutely extraordinary things.
I couldn't agree more, and it's really interesting hearing you speak around, where the sector is, and I think it's a bit of a, being honest about where we are as a reality, and I think sometimes it's that kind of, rather than trying to put out all the time, oh, we're great, look how brilliant we're doing, look at this, look at that, going, well, actually, you know what, this hasn't gone well, or this is hard, or this is a challenge. What is it we need to do? And I mean, for you, it's a really strange one. I always find the CIH presidency, because on one side you have someone come in with loads of energy. You've been supported by your peers to bring on a campaign. They give you 12 months, and then suddenly it's
go.
and so in 12 months is quite difficult to make all the changes hoped for. But what would you like to kind of see implemented over the next 12 months, change over the next 12 months? What would be a success for you, I guess, during your presidency?
Yeah. It's a really important question, Matt, and one of the conversations I had with the team at CIH, because there've been some amazing presidential campaigns, and not least what Ellie Holt has delivered in terms of the Choose Housing campaign and the importance of that. And I think it's sad sometimes that that disappears into the long grass almost. And so I think part of what I'd like to see in the next 12 months, there's an element of seeing resilience recognised, not only as like an individual responsibility, but as an organisational priority. I'd like to see a shift away from that kind of survival mindset, and to one that really does embrace learning, embraces support, and that kind of that shared strength. Because I think there's a, when I looked at my campaign to go into the president, apply for CIH President in the very beginning, and I'd talked about this, I know, on the last round table I attended, is that it was very much about that joined up working. And when I looked at that as a campaign, it was probably too high level, I think, in terms of being able to see a significant change in the 12 months I've got. So I think if there's a, I'd like to see continuation of Ellie's campaign, and I'll do everything I can to continue to support that. But in terms of the Rooted in Resilience campaign, it's very much about, leaders modelling vulnerability, not just authority. And for me, that, I'm very open, I would say, with the staff that I work with. And I think sometimes that vulnerability gives an opportunity for people to see us as being human as well, and not just, a director of corporate services or whatever we might be. So I think leaders modelling that vulnerability. I'd like to see opportunities for teams to make more space to talk about well-being, not just performance. We've seen a lot around managing performance recently, and certainly for us as a housing provider, we're seeing less and less funding come through the HRA in terms of the housing management model. We're having to do more with that. We're expecting more from our staff. Customers, quite rightly, have expectations, and they change over time as well. And I think it's very much about creating a space to talk about well-being, not only performance. New starters into housing, and this follows on a little bit from Ellie's campaign, in that, you know, when we do have people join us in housing, that those new starters are supported not only with, you know, a great induction or an induction pack or whatever that looks like, but with mentors as well. And some of the work that we're just doing recently with some of our tenant board members is looking how we get those tenant members more involved in communities, in how we deliver and you know, speak with customers about what they're looking for, what their needs are, how we translate, I guess, in terms of a finite resource, how best we can deliver that. And I think ultimately it's about, you know, that experienced professionals are really valued, not just for what they deliver, because, you know, in the main, what housing professionals deliver is, you know, it amazes me every day. And I'm not out there on the front line, but, you know, when I see what our staff are able to do positively in a short space of time, I know there's some kind of question around the managing performance, but also for the wisdom that they can share. So I'm hoping you know, when I finish in less than 12 months' time, actually, you know, there's something to say. This has given us the opportunity to talk, to make sure we're in a good position, to make sure we can pass that and, you know, link that with our customers, and that would be amazing.
There's a couple of things which have come in the chat, one of which I'm going to come back to because I think it's on the list of questions I've had sent through previously as well, regarding the role of residents within your campaign. I think that's a really, really important thing for us to come back to. But there was a point made by both Brian and Debbie that have kind of combined here that I want to bring in. So Debbie has said, I totally agree around the wellbeing aspect of conversations. Staff are doing so much, and it's very important to look after them in order for them to undertake their role to the best of their ability. It ties into Brian's point of, do you feel there's a lack of openness and honesty around some leadership, which is resulting in staff feeling not supported on the ground? Now, I never want this to be a place where going, that person's great and that person's awful, along those lines. But I think when you're talking around, you know, this idea of resilience, it isn't just our customer facing roles, it's resilience all the way up through to still be kind of brave and open enough to go, we got this right, we got this wrong, and actually if we are getting it wrong, what are we doing to fix it? Case Management Solution Group, or CMSG, are the home of React, the UK's #1 case management system for ASB and community safety. We are delighted to have them as one of our key sponsors for Social Housing Roundtable 2025 into 2026. And with the ASB app now fully integrated to the platform, it allows residents to record, monitor and report issues directly to their case office in live time. What's not to love? CMSG are bringing simplicity back to case management, and I cannot recommend them enough and thank them for all of their support through this period and through the rest of the year. Thank you, CMSG, and do please go check them out on social media and on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think they are both really key points, and it takes me back probably about 3 years when I introduced growth mindset as a concept to our senior leadership team. So I guess for me in the industry I've worked in, it's always been a thing. I see the importance of coaching, you know, people to develop themselves and move forward. But when I introduced the concept to our senior management team, it was like, oh my gosh, this is a little bit woo-woo, I think the comment was. But what it's enabled us to do, I think, is actually look at ourselves and look at each other, because we do need support within that group. It's tough at the bottom, but can be tough at the top. And I think it is about encouraging people just to open their minds a little bit, even if, you know, there's a school of thought that says, do you know what, I'm good how I am. I think you've got to be able to open your mind and consider something different, because certainly I think in the world of housing, it has a very traditional background. You know, it's traditional in its operation, the way it came about. And actually, we're probably not in so much of a traditional world anymore. It's very different. And I think we've got to be able to adapt and change. And for me, that resilience is about learning that adaptation and change. For me, it's not just about, and I probably saw this in my father, I would say, when, he was, my mum and dad, and I was brought up in social housing. I saw the real positives of what that meant to them. But I think also resilience for my dad at the time was about, just got to get on with it, keep going, keep doing this. And I think whilst there's an element of me that's probably grown up with that, I think there's also, it is about understanding where, something isn't right anymore, something can be different. Let's explore what it is. And do you know what? If it doesn't work, let's go back and understand why it doesn't, but have the resilience to, kind of carry that forward.
I agree completely. I was going to bring in a point that Lizzie made in the chat, but I can see she's got her hand up, so I was going to bring her in. If anyone would also like to come in and ask their question in person, like Lizzie has, please use the react symbol at the bottom of your page and raise hand, and we'll bring you in. But Lizzie, I'll pass over to you.
Thanks, Matt. Hello, Julie.
Hello.
My name's Liz. My name's Lizzie Spring. I'm 71 and therefore have retired a couple of years ago. I've been renting from housing associations for 38 years since I took on a tenancy in order to be able to be a foster parent. Yeah. But parallel to that, I've mostly been a voluntary sector manager, briefly a chief executive of a small housing association, but mostly worked in social work or the voluntary sector. Renting from housing associations nowadays really harms my mental health and really harms my resilience. And because being a self-sufficient, highly educated professional and being treated as a pleb really, as I get older and older, it becomes more and more difficult to deal with. And I live in central London. There's absolutely no way of moving out of social housing anymore here. And I didn't buy when I was younger and it was all affordable. So my question is, there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of tenants and leaseholders with my sort of professional background who've worked as chief executives in the voluntary, public and health sectors for years, probably not chief execs in the health sector because they're rich, but our sectors aren't. And we are a massive resource. We don't need to have involved tenants reaching out to us to find out our needs. We're completely competent about solving our own needs and also about telling our landlords if we need something. But what we're not getting is being included in the solutions for what you absolutely rightly have identified as the decreasing resilience of the landlord staff. Because I'm in my early 70s, I'm very often now 3 times the age of most of my landlords' young staff. And they're delightful and they leave every 6 months. And you've got this huge resource of very highly skilled, qualified, trained tenants and leaseholders who could actually, the landlords could actually do a skills audit, find out who we are, find out what skills we've got and how to use them, and then commission us to act as consultants, as mentors, as support workers. I think this would hugely bridge this bizarre dissonance between how tenants perceive landlords and how landlords perceive both themselves and us. If I hear phrases like, our tenants are at the heart of everything we do, or we support the most vulnerable in society, once more, I'm going to find the nearest tower block and jump off it. It's incredibly humiliating and very, very untrue. But what is true, this massive resource of social workers, nurses, teachers, community workers, volunteers, voluntary sector managers, all of whom are being lumped into this vulnerable, needy client group narrative. I don't know whether this is my last sentence. I don't know if it's true of all landlords, but mine has an absolute maximum of 10% of the tenants require any form of external support with their daily lives, which means 90% of us don't.
Yes.
But the only ones who are referred to or put in annual reports or described on social media are the ones that do, with hideous little stories about how grateful they are, often allied with photographs of them into that. And I think that this massive professional expertise in the tenant body is partly why a lot of us are so angry, because we have done, as you described, have taught our own staff teams for years how to work better, how to seek and gain support, and given it to them. And we would like to be able to be commission paid, not as volunteers on a panel, but paid colleagues and peers to actually support you. So I've set up a National Tenants Federation group, which is a lot of different, it's really interesting. Get in touch with me privately.
I will. I absolutely will. Thank you. Yeah,
it's on LinkedIn. You can go and join it. Several chief execs of housing associations have. Alicia and Brian are both in it as well, who are in this chat. And it's all sorts of tenants groups from all over the country, but not individuals talking about their problems with their landlords, but chairs and coordinators of fairly big tenants groups and campaigns who are trying to set up a network to actually
I'm going to cut in slightly for the time. I'm going to give Julie the chance to answer.
I'll shut up, of course.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you, Lizzie. Julie, back to you.
Thank you, Matt. Elizabeth or Lizzie?
Lizzie.
Lizzie, firstly, can I say thank you for sharing something so personal and powerful. I think what you've expressed captures a really important and very much overlooked dimension of housing. And certainly when we look at, how lived experience of tenants who are also skilled professionals in whatever they may be, it is a key area. Interestingly, we've had the regulator of social housing in last week. They're still in, but we met with them last week. And one of the questions around the tenant TIA standard is about how we link with, I think it was hard to reach customers is what it said, and vulnerable customers. And one of my challenges back was, how do you define someone that's hard to reach? Is that because actually they don't want to be reached? And I think there's a real stigma, isn't there, still, I would say, around tenants generally, but social housing tenants, in that tenants sit at home all day waiting for the repairs to come in, and actually it's not true. And we've done some segmentation work that's actually given us a lot of rich data in terms of our customer groups and how they might want to be involved. But if I can, Lizzie, just reflect back and suggest a way, I guess, to shape this into a clear message or an initiative, that I would be absolutely over the moon to get in touch. I'll jump on LinkedIn as soon as we're done and I'll connect, because I think what there is a potential campaign thread in terms of how we use that tenant expertise network. I think there are challenges in that. I had a conversation with our Deputy Chief Exec at the City Council a little while ago, because I think if we are really serious about tenant involvement, tenant influence, tenant engagement, then we have to have some resource to be able to start something with that or continue something with that. But I think there's certainly either a national or a regional kind of platform in bringing together housing association tenants with those professional skills, whether it's education, health management, community development, to think about how that co-design of services might be supported. And I wonder whether it's actually something I will call you, Lizzie, if I can, and have another conversation, but I would like to raise this at the CIH, because I think there's an opportunity to not only think about that mutual resilience, if I come back to my campaign, to extend the focus on resilience to tenant resilience, but also to acknowledge that relationship between landlords and tenants, and, you know, that respectful partnership, I think, where I would agree with you totally. I think housing associations, in the main, as far as I know, we're missing a trick, I would say. And, you know, we're aware from some of the work that we've done through the segmentation, is that we have a lot of our tenants, many of our tenants are out at work, they're doing different things, they want to get involved, but there's a limit to how they want to be involved. And I think we've got to widen that that tenant involvement opportunity. But also I think there's a real kind of national approach to that, because there's so much learning, particularly in different areas, such as, you know, what London is like compared to more rural areas is going to be very different. So I think if we, you know, if we are truly honest and serious about having a sector that's built on growth, respect, resilience, we've got to harness the wealth of experience. And I think through creating those genuine partnerships with tenants who are ready and willing to be part of the solution is an absolute key point.
Thank you very much, Julie. Alicia, I'll bring you in. There's a few points coming in on the chat. If you'd rather ask a question in the chat, I can bring it in for you. Please do. But Alicia, I'll pass over to you initially first.
Hi, Julie.
Hi.
Following on a bit and reiterating a lot of what Lizzie said, Lizzie and I know each other well, and I'm very much in support of her particular version of the tenant's voice, as she knows. I come from a very similar background too, and you know, it's sometimes very difficult not to be patronised, but yeah. So I'm grateful for opportunities like the ones that Matt give us here. Yeah. I can see on this meeting a number of my heroes who know what it is to work, usually without payment, on behalf of 4 million tenants and their families. You know, it's a big sector.
Yeah.
We desperately need your help, because there are huge gaps in education which are actually making work. They're making work for the Housing Ombudsman. They're making work for our landlords, and you know, my landlord is a particularly good proactive one, and they're getting in the way of our empowerment. We're getting in the way of ourselves. You talk about the problems with resilience. I would say within the tenant movement, it's more about apathy, because we haven't been listened to for decades. And my biggest issue is, I go to people and they say, what's the point? It hasn't changed. It's never going to change. Yeah. So I think as well, we need to make the narrative a bit more positive. I believe things have changed. You can call me a dreamer, people do. I think things have started to change over the past couple of years. So we need to be working together, and we need to get back to talking about the importance of social housing. We need to talk about cohesion, community, and the health of the nation. I was actually invited to be at a conference today to talk with Health Creation Alliance, to talk about how social homes are connected with the health of the nation.
Yes.
So I would say, while it's good to talk about resilience, we also need to talk about the positives, because between us, we're the only people who are going to get this right.
Yeah.
You know, we're the only ones to do it, but we need help from professional bodies like yours to work out how we're going to access those tenants who still don't have the basic education.
Yeah. Thank you, Alicia. Again, a really important point, and one of the things that we have talked about in terms of so we've got a strong learning and development arm to the business, and some of what we've talked about just recently with our customer involvement panel, which is a panel of only a few tenants. It's 16, but we're kind of working up and considering how we kind of enable that group, and part of that is about the learning and development. And I do think there's a there's a real strong need to ensure that not only staff are skilled and able to do what they need to do, but tenants are skilled and able to do what they need to do. We've seen some real positive opportunities through some of the youth employment work that we've done in the city. And that's created opportunities for youngsters of our tenants who have then gone back and been able to say to their parents or grandparents, aunts or uncles, whoever it is, you know, there are opportunities. And I think that's a really important part as well.
Thank you very much, Julie. And like I say, I want to make sure it's a strange one. I always find the role of the CIH president, because people see it and kind of like, great, well, you've now got loads and loads of power. And yet, weirdly, it's this kind of like co-figurehead that's alongside the CIH that happens to be running a campaign, and you do it for 12 months and then you're a former president. And it's a really difficult one in terms of influence and thing, but it's also, you know, I know when we were looking at, or when people were campaigning and things like that, it was clear that I think one of the reasons your campaign stood out was because you talked so openly about actually the work that Wolverhampton Homes, yourself and others have been trying to do in terms of actually getting communities to integrate with the business. And I believe that's coming through, and I'm hoping to see more and more of it. And I can't wait to see Rooted in Resilience really takes off, and why I think it's really showing why that campaign was so vital and why we're at a stage where actually resilience is so broad. And that's why I said, well, look what you're trying to achieve in 12 months. And I genuinely know how hard, it's almost like a full-time job alongside your full-time job. So I really do wish you the best of luck.
Excuse me. It is. I think it's really positive to listen to kind of what's being said though. And I think I typed a few notes as we were going, because I think there's some opportunities, certainly for the CIH as well, in terms of, you know, are there joint learning modules, whatever those learning modules look like, where staff and tenants can learn together. You know, whether that's about regulation. Alicia had said, you know, some of the impact of what happens in that we get to the ombudsman, when actually, if there was better learning at the outset, and this is something that we're doing with our customer involvement panel, is kind of the back to the drawing board with complaints, because what we understand to be a complaint and what's defined, if you like, in the HO code is probably not what others see when they're making a complaint. And that's a real kind of key piece of work for us. But I think there's certainly, you know, there's a bridge to some professional bodies as well, I would say. Now, that could be CIH, National Housing Fed, TPAS, to create, I don't know, maybe some open access memberships or some forums, better forums for tenants who want to contribute. And I think there's certainly some ideas that I'll take away from today. So, you know, thank you to you. I never come on and profess to know it all. I would never do that, and I don't by any stretch, but some really good points.
Thank you very much, Julie. Jan, I'm going to bring you in. Oh, you've accidentally muted yourself again. You unmuted and then remuted. Haven't quite seen how you there. Are you back?
Right. Okay. Well, only because I've got trouble with my eyes at the minute, and my screen is so small. You may have seen me with a magnifying glass. I'm trying to read the words on the screen. It's a nightmare. That's the trouble of being the oldest one on the call yet again. Julie, hi, congratulations. We've not met. You're the only CIH president over the last 20 years that I don't actually know. So I hope at the stage that we'll get to know you, because one of the reasons I don't know you, of course, is because you're not technically or up until now, being a housing professional. You've come in a completely different route, and congratulations for that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things that Lizzie said, because I'm aware of Lizzie from LinkedIn and we've exchanged views before. But from a historical perspective, I was not a social housing tenant. Your parents weren't social housing tenants; they were council tenants. There's nothing wrong with saying council tenants, because social housing is a concept that's been devised by politicians over the last 30 years. I was a council tenant and living on a council estate for 30 years in East London, whilst at the same time being a chief officer in the London Borough and an elected residence rep on the estate on which I lived. So I'm very familiar with all the nonsense about tenants being not of any benefit. And I agree with Lizzie entirely about the fact that not enough has been done about tapping into that expertise, because when I was interim managing director of a subsidiary of a housing association in South London, I actually took 3 tenants representatives to what was Harrogate. The CIH conference was in Harrogate, much to the horror of the organisation, because they didn't think that I should be spending money helping residents find out what was going on in the housing world. So I think anything that we do, and I don't like the word resilience, at least I'm old, all these newfangled words coming in, but I think the concept of having people participating or being able to participate if they want to, because that hard to reach thing is really true, because actually the hardest to reach group in housing are housing professionals themselves. If you talk to your marketing team about how many housing professionals open their emails from the CIH, you'll be horrified at the number.
No.
It is a tiny figure. So I think anything that we can do to bring in expertise that exists within our own organisations, wherever it happens to sit, it is to be applauded. And I think that the initiative that Lizzie has launched, I mean, be fair, there's National Federation of Tenants. Wow, that's a really good idea. It's only there 30 years ago. Needs to be pursued, and more power to your elbow if you can get involved in that. The other problem you've got, of course, is that you're on the edge of decision making in the CIH, and you'll be seen as a thorn in their side if you start saying things that they're not happy with. But
I'm happy to be a thorn. That's what I'm there for.
Good luck to you.
Jan, I do actually.
No, it's Jan, not
Jan.
Jan.
Sorry, I do actually remember catching up with you and watching one of your sessions at Manchester, probably 12 months or so ago now. But I would have been with Sean Aldis.
Well, obviously, you know, I know Sean very well, and that's perhaps at some stage we can catch up on that as well. So thank you for that, and for you remembering me. You really need to get out more, but good luck.
Thank you, Jan. Thank you, Julie. I mean, Julie, from your side, you know, one of the things that when this campaign launched, I think when you were initially discussing kind of which area to focus on for your campaign, was this idea of actually, is it, and I guess it touched a little bit on what Jan said then, is it that we need to be more resilient, or is it just things have got harder and we need to be more realistic about things have got harder and we need to have more processes in place between the two of them? And the demanding pressures you touched on earlier, do you feel that there is a kind of solution that the presidency, or maybe even just talking about this more openly, because I think this is one of the key things of the presidency for me anyway, is sometimes trying to achieve something in 12 months can be really hard, but what it does is it brings the conversation to the table for 12 months consistently at big events. So that kind of conversation of actually, is housing trying to be, you know, just trying to do too much, or housing professionals trying to do too much at the moment because of the level of support on them, which takes you away then from just being, you know, a housing provider which provides a warm, comfortable, affordable place to live, which is really what housing is all about. Do you feel that split is becoming, you know, are we talking about that enough openly in the sector? And is that something I feel that you're hoping your campaign might allude to? Alert Call return as one of the keynote sponsors for the Social Housing Roundtable in 2025 into 2026, and we're delighted to have them back. Alert Call help as many people as possible feel safe, connected and informed by combining ingenious technology and award-winning human contact. As you can see from this touchscreen I've got with me, Alert Call's digital engagement solution helps social landlords proactively know their customers and properties by putting a portable touchscreen in every home, offering a daily property check through the optional OK Each Day service, plus repairs reporting, tenant surveys and much more. They also provide Beyond Warden Call, an easier, simpler and lower cost wireless warden call solution with video door entry, dispersed telecare and smoke alarms. Alert Call work with over 60 housing providers across the UK to enhance two-way engagement between customers and their landlords. In 2022, Alert Call won the Queen's Award for Enterprise and Innovation, and in 2023, Alert Call won Housing Supplier of the Year. We're delighted to have them back with us throughout the course of this year, and please do go check them out on social media and LinkedIn to find out more. Thank you very much, Alert Call, for sponsoring us again. Provide some support with.
Yeah, I hope it will. I think it's a very kind of necessary question, if I'm honest, Matt. And I think there's almost like a deep truth somewhere in that housing has over time become a catch-all for a lot of society's kind of concerns, whether it's poverty, health inequality, and social behaviour we see, digital exclusion, and importantly, the community cohesion as well. And I think, you know, when you look at housing, I think it's always been more, and back to Jan's point, you know, my parents were council tenants, and it's always been about more than bricks and mortar. I think there is an element of security. I know certainly for my parents there was a real feeling of belonging and dignity, and I think somewhere over kind of recent years, when you think about public services have, you know, kind of retreated, we've seen inequalities widen, housing sometimes is asked to pick up the pieces, and almost landlords and staff then become a bit of a safety net of last resort. And I think whilst it comes from a good intention, probably it stretches the sector quite thin, and that then I think is a risk to staff, which is why resilience, and I take on everybody's point, resilience is a word, and I think it can sometimes have a negative connotation, and I don't want it to be about that. What I want it to be about is kind of you know, providing, managing good homes, supporting thriving communities, and I think the important thing in empowering tenants to shape what their futures look like. I think the danger in that we try and do everything is that we risk doing nothing sustainably well, and also I think we risk losing some of that kind of simple truth, if you like, in that, you know, a safe, affordable and secure home is in itself an opportunity for transformation, and that, I guess, is, you know, something to consider certainly through the campaign. But I absolutely love that there's a little bit of a, you know, kind of slight change this morning that I'd like to bring in, certainly around the tenants fed, and is something that we had talked about over the last week or so, because we had a tenants federation that supported some of the tenants and residents associations, which was replaced by TPAS a little while ago, and I think they're different things.
Brilliant. And it's one of those, isn't it, where I know, knowing you, you know, maybe off screen more than on screen, that idea of being able to be a bit disruptive isn't a bad thing at all. And
absolutely not. I love it. I love it. Shapes our thoughts. Yeah, shapes our thoughts.
Yeah, and that was the point in the roundtable in the first place, was to go, look, you know, people talk an awful lot, but sometimes we're not doing something with something. And I know you will kind of challenge both the sector and CIH to do more and take more away from actually, you know, as you say. And it's interesting that Jan mentioned there about, you know, the word resilience and other parts and what it means and people's connotations of it. I think the problem is people have just heard it now as another, oh yeah, that just goes on a list like culture, like whatever.
Yes.
It's just another word.
Yeah.
But actually, when you deep dive into resilience and what it's about and what needs to happen, this is a sector you have to be incredibly resilient for, because when I first started recruiting in it 14, 15 years ago, welfare reform had just come in, we were dealing with that, but it was kind of one big thing that was drip fed.
Yes.
We've got about 7 or 8 different things that are all coming in at once. As you get out, you know, you start to get a handle on one bit, well, then another piece comes in, another piece, and then we as a sector are still quite reactive, and we can sort of go, right, well, we need to get someone over to deal with, you know, Awab's law coming in, and we need, you know, someone spoke to me literally last week saying, what are you doing about Awab's law coming in? I was like, if you haven't got a plan yet, you're a little bit.
It's
kind of about 10 minutes. Now it's obviously even closer.
Yeah.
So I think this point around truly kind of taking a step back and being able to go, it's hard, but are we making it harder for ourselves, and why are we doing that, is incredibly important. And I think actually we'll be really interested to see how that shapes over the 12 months in terms of almost more kind of going from resilience to, I guess, self-reflection.
Definitely. And you know, I'm a real believer in that, you know, it takes many of us to get to where we need to be. And you mentioned, Matt, about the disruption, which is something I've introduced several times into Wolverhampton homes, because, as I said earlier, you know, I may be in the position I'm in, doesn't mean I've got all the answers. And, you know, I'd never profess to have that. But what we have got is a lot of people with a lot of experience, knowledge, skills, lived experience that can help shape where we need to go. And that for me is part of the resilience of housing, I guess.
In terms of then, one of the things you mentioned that I just found interesting, and you said following on from Ellie's campaign, with this idea of training and teaching people who are coming in. I guess it touches a little bit on Lizzie's point as well, around people coming in, lasting 6 months and leaving. And obviously there's a number of reasons for that. Some people come in and find that the sector is just not for them, but a lot of the time it is that kind of breadth of expectation that comes on somebody who could be new to the sector, isn't on a massive salary, but relying on that kind of almost vocational kind of, you know, sense of self, and that's the reason they're in the role in the first place. What is it that I'm not necessarily what you've necessarily done at Wolverhampton Homes, so there might be something you can share, but in terms of that resilience piece, what you're doing to try and help younger people, or what maybe you're hoping over the next 12 months to help people who are coming into the sector to stick with it, where do you think we fall down the most? Because for me, and this is just something I noticed, is that actually we get so reliant on recruiting people with experience that actually we then expect people to be able to hit the ground running, which is my bugbear of a term, hit the ground running from day one. And actually we've given them no chance to buy into our business, our culture, and how we do things. So therefore they don't get as much support.
Yeah.
I mean, thoughts in terms of generally, I guess, what that piece of your campaign is going to look like.
Yeah, I think when you, you know, the sector itself will often kind of bring in professionals full of energy and full of commitment, but I think then can quickly become overwhelmed by some of the complexity of housing roles, the regulation, safeguarding finance, community engagement. There's, you know, the list goes on. I think there's also probably a bit of an emotional weight of supporting some of our tenants that are going through crisis, and then I think probably you know, is there a bit of a disconnect, I guess, between, you know, the mission they signed up for and in some cases the bureaucracy and constraints they encounter. And I think, you know, without the proper support and those reflection spaces that we've talked about, that passion can quickly fade. And I think I've said this before, you either change the culture or you become the culture. And I think it's easy to become the culture. It's probably less challenging to do that. But I think in terms of kind of Wolverhampton Homes, we have got structured support for new starters. I think the one thing that we miss in that is that work with tenants. And the more I'm kind of thinking about what's been said this morning, the more, you know, thought I'm having in that. So we do ask for tenants to support us in recruitment. But what we don't do, and I think, you know, back to Lizzie's point, we're missing a trick, is that we don't ask tenants to mentor or support new staff. And I think that is a gap, I think. But I think certainly you know, in terms of the campaign, there has to be a space for honest conversations and kind of normalising what that might look like rather than ignoring it. Obviously, the investment in the professional qualifications that's coming through as part of the fifth standard that's coming in, but I think, you know, importantly, it's more about people and relationships, and the qualification is important. I think it's got a place, but I think alongside that, it is very much about you know, being intentional about how people are working, what they're working with, whether that's resource from the organisation or, you know, kind of there's a bit of community connection maybe, you know, helping staff spend some time in neighbourhoods, understanding tenant experience, whatever that may look like. And I think that probably would help to ground a little bit the purpose from day one.
I agree, and I think it's about kind of giving people the chance as well to. I know you've mentioned it before, to kind of fail, give people a chance to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Without being.
Yeah.
Not saying great, go out and fail tenants. I'm saying, you know, if it's a chance to kind of make mistakes, whatever that might look like, but there's a backup in place, but to learn and to be able to, you know, to make errors without it suddenly being, oh God, we need to panic, and you have the big nightmares with it.
Yeah.
And we're going into kind of last few minutes here, and the hour's absolutely flown by. I want to say a massive thank you to you, and I want to say thank you to you not just for being able to come on and share insight and share the campaign in obviously on our milestone episode today, but more importantly for being somebody who's going to come on, I think, as a director and be able to go, actually, you know what, things aren't perfect and we're doing our best, but there are things we need to improve, and there are always ways to learn. And I think what's clear from today is you've already been saying, I'll take those away, I'd like to connect, I'd like to do this, I'd like to do that, which is brilliant. I will just say, for those who are new with us, next week, Robert Gillam from WHG, carrying on our Black Country theme, apparently, in terms of speakers, which is lovely. He's coming on to talk about, he's their Corporate Director of Strategy, Assets and Transformation, which I did have to write down because that was not.
That's a big title.
So he's coming on to talk about the implementation of Awab's law, which is about as timely as we can possibly get. But Julie, just a final kind of question to you, really. How can people engage with the campaign? How can people get involved in the campaign? And I guess, you know, how can people connect with you and help promote it moving forward? Because I think you're in for a really, really important year here.
I do. I am so excited about the opportunity, and I think one of the things for me, for people, is that I'm always happy to share a phone number or an email address, so you can contact me through that. LinkedIn, obviously, I'll be on. I think there's a contacts I'll make from today, and I would thank the group that have been on the call today, because I think this is what it's about. It's about opening up conversation and looking what we can do differently and how we can do that. And I guess, you know, join in the conversation, however you get in touch, I'm absolutely fine. Share your story. I think, you know, our voices matter, and they matter a great deal. I think they're supporting others, so whether that's through mentoring, encouraging, or listening. And I think that, you know, ultimately looking after ourselves, because resilience does start with well-being. It's about having the right mindset. It's about being open to challenge suggestions. And I think that will help us shape the next stage of our profession. And I'm hopeful that, you know, from some of the conversations today, maybe me and others will be back to kind of give some of the good news stories or things that we've done differently, and how that's supporting. And I would also like to think that at the next board meeting for CIH, because I do feed back to CIH each time I speak somewhere or have conversations, there's some real gems in what we've talked about today that I think will absolutely kind of shape the next stage of our profession.
Fantastic. Thank you very, very much, Julie. Thank you. As I say, if anybody would like to reach out to Julie and can't find her on LinkedIn or anything, let me know, because I'll make those connections. But for now,
happy to share my number and my email address.
The very, very best of luck with the next 12 months.
Thank you so much, and thank you again for inviting me in. It's been an absolute pleasure.
You mentioned it there, Elaine and I will definitely have you back next year to find out kind of how the year's gone and what comes next after it. But until then, thank you, Julie. Thank you, everybody.
Pleasure.
And we'll see you all soon.
Thanks all. Have a good day. Bye.